My guru here, my first guru, Neem Karoli Baba, and he was the master of oneness. I have some pictures here. I'm an old-fashioned kind of Lama, so I have pictures here. This is, it's an antique thing. It's called the book. It was printed in the 1970s by us devotees with photos of the guru and ring bound. It was before the days of Macintosh, make your home album and stuff like that. And there's one great picture of him here saying all one, and that's going to appear magically on the newfangled screen here. So thank you very much. It's so wonderful to be here. I love coming to this ashram. It's really a sanctuary, a pilgrimage place, a refuge in the stormy waters of our troubled world and agitated, anxious times. The theme of this week, as Meenakshi said, is unity and diversity. And I wanted to talk about finding oneness in the many, as that is such an important message, especially in these fractured and fractious times when we need more inclusivity and to recognize our interdependence, interconnectedness, and so on. Because when we see ourselves in others and others in ourselves, then who can we harm? Who could we exploit? How can we be overly egotistic or selfish? Anyway, that's part of the spiritual message and important things I want to talk about tonight. Because in the end, as Maharaji would always say, really, it's all about love. And that's somehow easier said than realized. Of course, love could have many definitions. I'm not going to go into that. But we're going to talk tonight somewhat and touch upon love, oneness, truth, unity and diversity, etc. As it's Christmas, yesterday, I think, was the solstice. Now the light is growing again, which is kind of the meaning of the ancient and more earthy or shamanic pre-Christian times. So the light is growing, the spirit is rising in us and in all where it lives. And that's very important, I think, to celebrate every day, and certainly now at this holiday season and together, and people of different faiths or no faith, or, if you look at the public polls by Pew or the other public polls, the greatest number of religionists who check a box on those polls is the nuns. And by that, I don't mean the female monastics, the nuns. As in no religion or none, no persuasion. Anyway, be that as it may, we're here together in the spirit, and it's beautiful. It's peaceful. We have music and dance. We have kirtan. We have devotion. We have bhakti, devotion. We have, I hope I'm not exaggerating, and gyan, wisdom, and love, and seva, and yoga, ethics, and so on. So important. I want to talk personally tonight, although I could talk about unity and diversity and what they call the 7 practices common, or the 8 practices common to all the world's major religions. You can read about that in a book by Roger Walsh. Or integral theory. You can read about that in Ken Wilber's book, Doorstop, big books, tomes. Or Teilhard de Chardin's great universal theory, or Sri Aurobindo's. But I want to talk a little more personally about my experience of this and what my guru taught me about it's all one, about sub-ek. If I can work this high-tech gadget, I'm becoming like my parents who didn't want to get rid of the rotary phone. Maybe you remember those days, and never got an answering machine or call, what do you call it, voice notes, audio recording. So we were with Neem Karoli Baba, Maharaji, Ram Das, his guru, Krishna Das, his guru, Dan Goleman's guru, my guru, Bhagwan Das's guru, too many to mention. You'll see it on the cover of a book that we're going to flash over called Love Everyone, which was his message. And this is him saying, and we're not really here to study comparative religion, as I said, or Sanskrit or Hindi, but it's nice to pick up a little smattering here and there. It's good for the old brain cells also, little foreign languages. So ek is one in Hindi. Sub ek, all one. This is what he's saying, and he would give us the big finger, this kind of finger. And we would say, oh, Maharaji, of course, he didn't speak English. He was an old guru. And we came from many different countries. So in a way, English was the common language, and there was a translator. Oh, Maharaji, should we go to see Sai Baba? Should we, miracles? Should we go to Anandamayi's ashram on the banks of the Ganges, the great female saint, silent saint, enlightened woman of India? Should we go to under the Bodhi tree in Bodh Gaya and meditate for 10 days silent, mindfulness, Vipassana, and loving kindness courses? Should we go here? Should we go there? What should we do? And he would say, in his 85-year-old toothless Hindi, Sabak! It was like an admission. Sabak! It's all one. Or it's all good, there was an implied pat on the head. It's all good, children. And also an implied, including here. Anyway, you take from this what you need. So sub-ek, not egg, sub-ek, this is a vegan mess, is the message here. No animals were harmed in the process of putting together this slideshow. All one. And he would sometimes send us. He was a wandering holy man, sadhu, sadhu, saint. I was with him in 71, 72, and then he had his Mahasamadhi, or he died in 1973, in the full moon in September. So he would kick us out of the ashram, or he would disappear and go to other parts of India, wandering in the jungle or the mountains. And we would be left to pursue our spiritual paths, either look for him or go to other gurus, ashrams, monasteries, lamas in Nepal, etc. Try to avoid the visa man, try to avoid the monsoon, the cholera, the dengue fever, the hepatitis, etc. There was a lot going on in those days in the third world, unlike here, where we're well taken care of and we have celestial seasonings, tea, in hot water day and night. What a blessing. Thank you, Lord. So Maharaj would say, Sabek, sure, go and see Baba, Harikan Baba or Sai Baba or whoever, and serve the saints. That's part of the message. Not just selfishly go there to have a good time or feel better or even to get blessings or enlightenment or God realization, but also serve the saints. This is something we're serving. Seva, service to God by serving humanity, etc. Service to the highest by serving the lowest, etc. Seva, as is stressed here in Swami Vishnudevananda and Swami Sivananda's ashram tradition. Very important. One of the 8 limbs of yoga, Ashtanga, codified by Patanjali along 2,000 years ago, is seva. Not just devotion, not just wisdom, not just ethics, not just yoga, not just meditation or awareness practice, but service. Giving yourself. Being a good Samaritan, if you want to put it in basic kid English, and more. Learning to give without expecting in return is the real generosity, or dana paramita, unconditional, selfless giving, as we call it in Buddhism. So Maharaji taught us love and service. He was a bhakta, a devotee. He didn't give us philosophy and meditation instructions. We chanted. If you've been here, if you're wearing pajama clothes of any kind, Krishna Das. you've been to Krishna Das's kirtan, or kirtan club as I call it. You know, many of us, we do that, and we've been doing that. Maharaji taught me to sing. I was a kind of college boy, you know, from New York, motor mind, motor mouth, Jewish on my parents' side, but not very religious, skeptical 60s, peacenik, or anti-war activist. And Maharaji taught me to sing and open my throat chakra and heart. And whenever I sing and chant, which is a great practice, whether we call japa yoga, kirtan, bhajan, etc., divine song, co-meditating with music, Maharaji, my guru, is right there, which brings us to the oneness and the unity and diversity. Even if I chant Shema Yisroel, etc., the Lord our God, the Lord is one in Hebrew. I'm not going to stress, you know, it doesn't. I'm not really thinking this, but it is right there. I'm not visualizing it, and I'm not looking for nothing. Are you with me? God is everywhere, as they say. That's the oneness. And then the oneness in diversity. If God's not here, where would he or she be? God is everywhere. That's seeing the oneness in diversity, the light in everyone, the divine in everyone and everything, the unity in diversity. In Buddhism, in Tantric Buddhism, we call it the Mandala Principle, the hologram, the great circle, where every part of the geometric hologramic mandala is the word, is the center. There's no corners or no outside and inside. There's no center and periphery. In other words, the center is in each of one of us. Just like each of Lord Krishna's gopis has a I, thou, one-to-one relationship with God, not just 1/1000th of Lord Krishna. So that's the unity and the diversity, and very important. So I came to experience this through these kind of practices, and of course samadhi and meditation, meditating on it, and self-inquiry, looking into the true nature of identity, and so on. Because when we recognize our true self, we recognize God. We understand a relationship of man and God, as they used to say in politically incorrect language. When you know who you are, and you find your true self with a capital S, not just your little ego separateness. Your true self with a capital S, you understand God. And like Meister Eckhart, and remember, this is the Interfaith Symposium, so I'm going to throw in a few interfaith allusions or quotes, whatever I can remember. I wrote a few down here because I'm losing my memory. Like Meister Eckhart, the great Christian mystic, said, the eye through which I see God is the eye through which he and she sees me. Savor this, please. The greatest Christian mystic of Europe. The eye through which I see God is the eye through which he or she sees me. That's the oneness. That's seeing through the illusion of separateness. That's non-duality, as we call it in Buddhism. Some translate the German. Meister Eckhart was a Germanist and a Latinist. Some translate the German as the eye with which I see God is the eye with which he sees me. I'm not going to belabor the theology tonight. I'm going to talk about a guru and some of these things. It's more fun. You can study these things on your own, and study and practice goes well together, as we see at this wonderful Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta Yoga Ashram. If we talk about interfaith, interspiritual, interreligious dialogue, interspiritual dialogue, as Brother Wayne Teasdale called it, a new movement in the West beyond the interreligious dialogue, which has got kind of stale and just preaching to the converted and the moderates talking to the moderates of each religion and not being able to communicate with the extremists of their same religion. You with me? Interreligious dialogue, it's very difficult for us, except preaching to people, dialoguing with people like ourselves. We can't get with the fundamentalist Christians or the fundamentalist, let's say, Sharia-loving Islamists very much, and have real dialogue. So interspiritual dialogue has tried to have a new take on this. Anyway, the Dalai Lama calls it Rime, or in Tibetan, or non-sectarian I happen to be a Tibetan scholar, but Rime is a good word to know. But it means non-sectarian or without bias. And you can hardly hear a talk by His Holiness the Dalai Lama without him mentioning non-sectarianism and the need for inclusivity today. So we see that to a certain extent in, the tolerant or more universalist side of Buddhism. Of course, Buddhism also has its intolerant, or should I just say more traditional, conservative, male-dominated, old-fashioned, preservationist-looking hierarchy and feudal hierarchy. Like any religion or most groups in this world, the male-dominated world. Things are changing, hopefully. Even talking about the word guru is a little tricky today with the Me Too movement and all that implies. I mean, in case you're watching the news from here, or last week, or last month, or last decades, wherever you were. Guru hierarchy structure in the decades of horizontalization and the wisdom of crowds and the Occupy movement and thinking more about equality and mutuality and alliances rather than organizational hierarchy, and always looking up at things, but also looking in or finding it in everyone, which I think is an important side of it, not just reacting against hierarchy. There is a natural hierarchy to things too, like in evolution. Not that it's better, but it's hard to say that a one-celled amoeba or protozoan or something is the same, is equal to, I don't know, a magnificent giraffe or a dolphin or a human. Of course, before God, all creatures are equal, but on the relative sphere and the diversity, there's a natural hierarchy. Just like I have my teachers, and then people look to me to a teacher now as I'm becoming old and infirm. So they try to strengthen me up and encourage me and bless me by asking me questions. So there's a natural hierarchy here. It's not by accident. You've all heard, like this morning, from Swami Shambhu Ananda, Arunachala Deva Mahapati, and Swami Brahmananda and the others. They're all wonderful, not just because they're men. I mean, the women, Swami sannyasis too, and we respect them. And I'm happy to put food in front of them, and I don't let them put food in front of me because of their discipline and seniority, as I respect them. Respect is a beautiful thing. So the Dalai Lama, I'm not going to tell my make me one with everything joke about the Dalai Lama, but you all know it. It's the title of my recent book, Make Me One with Everything, Buddhist Meditations to See Through the Illusion of Separateness. You can find a lot about this unity and diversity, Mandala Principle, Yabgyum and Tantric Oneness practice, and other things, practices in there. But make me one of everything. But how is always my question. How? So that's what we're practicing here on this path of God realization through yoga. Yoga does not mean calisthenics, as you well know. It means union, yoking, oneness in loose interpretation. I really did think about this talk because I think this is an important subject for us today in these fractious, these argumentative times, in these very factionalized, partisan times, in these increasingly fragmented times, although they're also increasingly interdependent with the global society and the huge environmental issues we all have on the planet, whether we admit it or not. It's not national anymore. We all have one sky, one water and one earth to be grateful for and to safeguard and steward and pass on to the next generations. So how can we find unity and diversity and recognize the one in the many? The single pearl of great price, as the Zen Buddhist master Huang Po called it. And he has a whole book by that title. If you're a reader, look it up, Huang Po, translated by John Blofeld. We all used to read that when we were in India in the 70s and 80s with our gurus. Because this kind of practice brings us great peace and harmony and fulfillment. We get a lot out of it, great spiritual equanimity and acceptance and gratitude. It's not just because oneness is like the better number, a best number, a first number. But it has a lot of benefits when you can when you see through the illusion of separateness, when you see through me and you, subject, object, I, thou, relations, as Martin Buber called it in his great Hebrew Jewish classic, I, thou. Seeing the divine in everything and also the mutuality of that relationship, I, thou. Check it out. That's real love, mutual reciprocity. A kind of transparent, translucent radiance, actually, but warm. A little story about Maharaji, since I do want to talk on love and so on. I think this is very important when we talk about devotion and bhakti, when we talk about gyan and wisdom development and philosophy, especially in non-dual Vedanta, Advaita. I don't really want to make this as a criticism, but sometimes I feel there's a lot of talk about, for example, in the Buddhist community today about mindfulness. And it wouldn't be bad if it was translated also as like heartfulness or soulfulness, not just about the mind. So I think that's important to remember. So one day we were sitting with Maharaji. Okay, I'm going to use the slideshow because it's here. I got a message from this monkey that haunts us that was Maharaji's indwelling deity, Ishtadevata, indwelling deity Hanuman, the embodiment of service to God. So these are some pictures from one of my old holy books. We made this in, 1970s, as I said. So he was named Neem Karoli Baba, or Maharaji, the great Dharma king. That was a title some gurus had. But Neem Karoli Baba. This is a recent book about him, Love Everyone, by Parvati Marcus, one of our sisters, about Western devotees' experiences of him. Here you can see some of the famous disciples on the back of the book, like Larry Brilliant, who just wrote Sometimes Brilliant. He was the head of the Google Foundation and other things in World Health. Who's there? Krishna Das, we all know and love, our Kirtanwala, our sing leader. We were all in India together. We're all the Das brothers. Ram Das, of course, the great pioneer of unity and diversity and oneness, the interfaith. Ram Das, there used to be a poster, I remember in the 70s when Ram Das first came back from India. When the hell was that? Let's see, I went in 1971. He must have come back in 1968 from his first or second trip. In my mind, that's like 15 or 20 years ago. But I was talking to some younger person today, and they said, no, I think it's 45. And I was like, whoa, I didn't even realize I was 45 years old. I'm still a graduate student, like, footloose and feckless, going around from ashram to pilgrimage place and beaches and mountains. So we were all there together. Ram Dass still live and in Maui and gives retreats and has books and, streaming. And we have podcasts on the Be Here Now network if you're interested. And there's a lot about Maharaji, Neem Karoli Baba. This is Maharaji, Neem Karoli Baba, when he was a young sadhu, a wandering holy man in India. Yes, we all have a path. He was on the path too one day. He wasn't born 80 years old and shouting at us young rascals, as he used to call us. Badmash! It means like little rascals or mischievous, naughty kids. I don't know if Swami Vishnu Devananda chastised you guys in that way. This is one of my favorite pictures of Maharaji. We always laugh about this one because notice the mudra, the right elbow. I know you came here to hear about, deep Buddhism and all, but just as a sidebar, he was double jointed in the elbows. And when we asked him, what the hell? He said, because I'm really Hanuman. I'm not kidding. You can ask Krishna Das. And then he went like this, and he went through his arms, and he wasn't like a hatha yogi. And his arms came over. And he said, see? Just like Hanuman. He was so loving. Here he is throwing some fruit at us as prasad, as blessings. I used to sit there and try to meditate in my white, holy, hand-spun cotton clothes from the Gandhi Bhavan, the Gandhi store. and try to meditate, be holier than thou, and even him. And he would like throw a peach. There was all kinds of candy and ladus like we had last night, those little round in the streets, and peaches and bananas, mangoes. And one day it was like, he like threw there was about 30 of us Westerners sitting around like this, a peach. Oh, thank you, Maharaj. He like woke me up from my escapist meditation to come back to the presence, to the oneness. I didn't want to hear my other friends talking. I was meditating. You know what I'm saying? Maybe you have that feeling sometimes. Here he is. Usually he was like half naked, and it's hot in India. They didn't have air conditioning and fans. But his sheet, his dhoti, he was so sweet and loving and great-grandfatherly. Oh, my God. He treated everybody the same. The Indian devotees whose parents had been devotees since 50 and 80 years ago and who were brought up that way. And us sort of scraggly, hippies and seekers on the path from Europe to Kathmandu, as they used to call it in India, seeking different things as we were. That just came yesterday. He treated everybody like God, let's say. Yes, he did ride on the Indian train, like the holy men and women in India go ride free on the train. They go around all over India like this, or walk. This is one of my favorite altar pictures of him. This shows how we used to sit in front of him. And this is his translator standing up. I know you think that this is probably some kind of really, bunch of questionable cult members who are outpatients from a mental hospital. But this is the wonderful and quite well-known Dada Mukherjee, professor, head of the economics department at the great Allahabad University in India, where the three holy rivers meet, Allahabad. And we used to stay at his house, and his wife and his parents took care of us, by the dozens, I mean, and fed us and helped us get visas and stuff like that, and nursed us when we were sick. And some other Indian devotees that had been with him 50 years, the Barmans. So, Sabek. So you see behind the barred window, if you know the third world countries or India, barred windows, and to keep the monkeys out and the thieves and things like that. So this was the ashram. That was his room, his office, as he called it. But there was nothing in there, and the business that transpired in there was what we're talking about. Really, no business. He was an Indian holy man who wandered and didn't have possessions. He used to wear this red plaid blanket. If you see Krishna Das, he's often wearing a red plaid shirt or bright red for Hanuman's color, which Maharaji wore. So the reason I want to mention this is, and in our interfaith way, so one day we were sitting around and probably just talking Bekar Bat, which is Hindi for like nonsense and gossip, as Maharaji would accuse us of. I don't know why. Oh, yes, I do know why. Because we were practicing what he called the five-limbed yoga. We Westerners, the five-limbed yoga. Oh, you haven't heard of this in this ashram? No, you're much too disciplined. Swami Brahmananda here, he wouldn't have it. The five-limbed yoga, Maharaji nicknamed it, that the Westerners practiced in the ashram. Eating, drinking chai, gossiping, napping, and milling about. Eating, drinking, chai, gossiping, napping, and milling about. Thank you, Maharaji. We love you. Teach us. So one day, Maharaji must have gotten tired of us sitting around and adoring him and trying to sit closer to him and fighting with each other to sit closer to the guru and rub his feet or get recognized, whatever our psyche demanded of us. And he said, in Hindi, of course, "How did Christ meditate?" And we were like, whoa, I never heard that in a sentence. Did you in 1972? Christ and meditate? Maybe now, 40, 50 years later, in the days of spiritual dialogue and global ecumenicism. How did Christ meditate? And we were all sitting there dumbfounded. Christ? You think we came here to India to hear about Christ? Christ didn't meditate. That's why we're here. And he looked around and nobody said anything. I mean, this is entirely my projection, but Krishnadas and Ramdas and others would tell you the same story. This is like our story about what Maharaji was thinking. He looked around and nobody said anything. How to cry. And he said kind of like frustratedly or rambunctiously, kind of like the grandparent who, you still don't know that 2 and 2 is 4. After all this high school and college we pay for. He said, he was lost in love. I'm translating, but trying to give you the mood. He was lost in love, lost in love, lost in love. And he started crying. And he went like that, and he jumped up, and he went into his room, and he slammed the door. And then, you see the window? He slammed the shutters. And we were like out for the day. Goodbye. We failed the test that day. Because we didn't know how Christ meditated. I mean, that was not a subject at my school or anywhere. Another day, my friend Harry Namdas, Ed Randall from New York, and his wife Miriam, who just, what's her name? I haven't heard it. Joanne were there in 1971. And one of Maharaji's things in Gurus is they initiate you, or you get a spiritual rebirth, so you get a name. Like when you're born, you might get a religious name or a new name anyway as a child. And he named Edwin Randall Hari Namdas, which was the name of God's servant, a saint of the 15th century. We're all named after bhakti saints. I'm named after the blind saint poet Surdas, who was blind to everything but God. Mirabai Bush is named after Mirabai, the great poetess and saint of bhakti in India. So Joanne said, I want a name too. We were kids. And he said, Mariam, your name is Mariam. And Joanne said, what? That's not, like, what? I want a name like Sita. And she didn't say. But, later she said, what do you mean, Mariam? And Maharaji, through the translator, taught him, he said, yes, that's how Maharaji calls Yeshu, God's mother, Mary. Mariam. He named her Mary, not Sita or Radha or Bhavani or, from the Hindu scriptures. So she, to this day, and actually she just died last year in the 70s, and Mariam. So Maharaji kind of turned us Jewish, atheist, agnostics, or communist, whatever we were, communards, really, commune people, and traveling hippies and seekers to appreciate Jesus, who we had never really read about much or studied from our Judeo-Christian background. Maharaji himself was so lost in love, and that was his main teaching. And he really opened my heart. Otherwise, I'm sure I would be a dried out salt plum of a Tibetan scholar. Even worse than I am now. So if we're going to see this sub-ek, how? So let's talk about the how. I like to be utilitarian. I'm a Capricorn, very earth sign, practical. We're covering all the religions here. Also stubborn goat, mountain goat, climbing to the highest peak. Okay, we don't have to psychoanalyze me right now. How are we going to realize the one in the many and see the God in everyone, and of course find God, the light, the divinity in not just everyone else, but in the last place we would look for him, in ourselves. The last place we would look for it and fight, and trust and believe in ourselves. So in Tibetan Buddhism, in Vajrayana Tantric Buddhism, in non-dual Diamond Path Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism in short, we have a practice called pure perception, or the Catholics might call it sacramental outlook. Pure perception. Buddhist pioneer Lama Trungpa Rinpoche, founder of Naropa and Shambhala training. Trungpa Rinpoche called it sacred outlook, seeing everything as like an altar and everyone like deities, human and animal, on it. This earth, this life, the inanimate universe as the altar and the animate as the deities. That's actually a practice of Tibetan Buddhism called Daknang for short. So we start to see, like I may see so-and-so as, whatever, just a this or that, or a young or an old, whatever gender you are, but also recognize that they have the divine, the Mary, the Jesus, the Tara, the Parvati, the Uma, the Bhavani, the Radha in them. The holy. Holy, 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 as Allen Ginsberg sang in almost every poetry reading he ever gave. It's all holy at a certain level. It's all equal at a certain level. No one, and I'm going to say this, it might be debatable, nothing is closer to God. Even the saints, from the absolute level. From the relative level, there may be some natural hierarchy. Because God is everywhere and in everything. And if God's not here or in you, then God's nowhere. Because God is said to be by all the religions in everywhere and everything. And this is like a common thread. This is like the water table under all the wells that the religions and the spiritual paths and the perennial traditions are like wells to get the water that meets the water table underneath. So we practice seeing the light in everyone and everything. The clear light, the luminosity, the Buddha nature, we call it in Buddhism, the divine nature, the true self, with a capital S, if you like, as it's called in Vedanta, as Ramana Maharshi and Pujaji and others would call it. If you think about universal, the unity of the faiths, think about our spiritual superhero, Ramakrishna of Calcutta. Anybody remember him? The Gospel of Ramakrishna, a great spiritual classic by an anonymous author who used his pen name M. Ramakrishna, the priest at the Kali temple near Calcutta, not a very learned person. The great Ramakrishna who had visions, the great worshipper of the Holy Mother, Ramakrishna, who had visions of the gods, the saints, the deities of all the different world religions. We don't hear about that today. Read about it. Look at the pictures. There's even a picture of him in samadhi. Everybody know what samadhi is? Like absorbed in God, trance state, but not trance. That's way too low. He was talking one day when he was a saintly sage and older, and he was gesticulating on a little stage in Calcutta. He was Swami Vivekananda's guru, if you're not familiar, who brought Hinduism and Eastern thought to the West, in the world really, in 1894 or something. Great Swami Vivekananda. Ramakrishna was his guru. Ramakrishna is gesturing, and he's standing on stage, and then he's talking about God or something, and all of a sudden, but blissful. I don't want to imitate Ramakrishna. This is embarrassing. You should see my face, but I don't want you to. And he stayed out for a long time. He wasn't faking, and he was like, I don't know, wood or something. Now, I don't know what that means. I'm just telling you. You can see the picture. He was an unusual, saintly yogi. He had visions, experiences, realization, and respected and worshipped the saints and gods, divinities, the archetypes, to be precise, maybe, of all the main world religions, the great Ramakrishna. So this is not unheard of, even in modern times. Vivekananda went to law school and spoke English in Calcutta, the modern times. Great Swami Vivekananda, Ramakrishna's disciple, who had been his guru in the previous life, according to their telling of their life story. The guru died, he was older, and then was reborn as Vivekananda. Ramakrishna's guru, with his mission in the modern world, the Ramakrishna missions. So some people actually experience the unity and diversity and see everything as God, and even become galvanized, or I don't know what that word would be, like mind melded, heart melded into the oneness, in a samadhi of oneness. It's unbelievable, like Nirvikalpa Samadhi, or the other one, Samadha Raja Samadhi, or whatever. There are technical, yogic, philosophical distinctions about these things. People have done research on practice on this for centuries in the laboratory of the inner spiritual mind. It's not just one big vagueness of oneness, like the Cuisinart, it's all one, like puree. No. It's more like bouillabaisse. It's all full of all kinds of fruits and, fish and bones and, whatever you get in the bouillabaisse. But that's important because that's how we recognize the oneness in the many. Each thing is distinct in its own way. I'm not going to say unique, like Rabbi, ex-Rabbi, what's his name in California with his theory of unique self. Mark, whatever. Unique self, I'm saying, but special in each. So when we study our tradition, we know how it is. Like one day I hope to know Buddhism well, and but I also study Hinduism and Judaism and Christian mysticism, a little bit of Sufism, because we live in the spiritual marketplace, and I have a lot of friends and colleagues. My life study since I was 19 or 20. When I went to India, and I was there in the 70s and 80s, and I was a Buddhist monk and did 3-year retreat, became a Tibetan Lama and things like that. So I exhort you to seek in such a way, because continuity and continuance and effort, as well as surrender and acceptance, is the secret of success. How are we doing on time? Maharaji was such a loving guru. He named me Surya Das, which is the sun, and also a poet, so it's very much my own kind of, personality. But I've had other gurus, and the Dalai Lama is like a guru to me. But really, to have a personal relationship with a guru, it's hard to relate to a Pope or a Dalai Lama. He's busy. And have your personal guru and your upa-gurus, the regents or intermediate gurus could be very helpful. But it's good to know, or discriminate, not just follow anybody and be a slavish follower. I always try to inculcate leadership in my students and disciples, not just followership. I think that's very important. And leadership, and then pass it on. We're getting all this transmitted into us for all, not just for little me, to become a bigger me, no. But to make a quantum leap into the we, from me to we, from me meditation to we meditation. Meditation, I like that. In Tantra, there's a lot of practices for non-duality, like Yab-yum. In Hinduism, it's called Shiva Shakti. Yab-yum, the archetype or picture of masculine and feminine sitting together in tantric embrace, or Maituna lying side by side. In the tantric archetypes or Himalayan deities, archetypes a much better word, sitting in embrace, in union, so that 1 + 1 equals oneness, not 2. So that when you become a whole person and you realize your wholeness, then you can be with another person wholly, another whole person. Not just trying to bring your broken, fractured, bolt or screw, whatever, to their nut. Like this bent out of shape piece of shrapnel of my fractured psyche, plus yours will make oneness. That's very impossible, difficult. That's the shrapnel tradition, not recommended. But the tantric tradition is the 1 + 1 equals oneness, not just the sacred third, like in a couples therapy. The country of us, which is good, but it's a quantum leap to realizing the oneness where you're mirroring each other with this perfect reciprocity and mutuality. So I think it's very important to find a practice that we can do where we can realize experientially oneness, unity, non-duality, God realization, whatever you want to call it. Thich Nhat Hanh says through realizing independence and interdependence, we realize oneness and we can naturally treat others as we would be treated. Just to give you a little Buddhist thought. The Dalai Lama says his religion is kindness because he realizes that he and others are not different and want and need more or less the same things, just pursue it by different ways. I think that's an excellent way of thinking about the different, major world religions and minor and other traditions. We all want and need the same things on relative and physical and also absolute and spiritual levels, but pursuing it by different ways. Different courses for different horses, no problem. Sometimes it looks different. Some people are going up the mountain this way, and it looks like they're going to the right, or whatever this is, counterclockwise. And other people are going this way. It looks like they're going to the left or clockwise up the mountain, spiritual mountain. It's just an image. And start arguing about whether you should go this way and not this way. Well, both are going up the mountain, the spiritual progress, the mountain. Because we only see a part of it. We compartmentalize, see so fractionally. When I was first in Europe in 1971, and I was just graduated college, and I was on my way overland to India. It took a couple of months and all through those countries. It's hard to visit these days, like Turkey, not so hard. Iran, harder. Afghanistan, Pakistan, harder. To India, by mostly public conveyance and hitchhiking. It was interesting. And I met the various people, and some people, and as I was interested in this and asking questions and reading spiritual books, if I could find them along the way, people seem to think that God, Yahweh, and Allah, of the three main Western traditions, are you with me, were not one God, were three. Even I knew that. Are you with me? That the gods of monotheism, Allah, Yahweh of the Old Testament, and and Judaism, Hashem, God, are not one, are three different gods. I mean, that's how fractional and really ignorant or not investigating thoroughly these subjects. So of course we don't understand or relate well to other religions. We don't even understand or relate well to our own religions. That's why I love teaching in our Dharma movement, where people are avidly seeking and interested in this, not just sitting in the pew because it's their church of origin and the parents make you go. I mean, I went to Hebrew school, got bar mitzvahed, and did all that. Me and my friends used to sit tying hundreds of knots in the taluses, in the white shawls, like we were sailors on a long voyage with no wind. No matter what the rabbi was saying, good or bad, he was a fine rabbi, really. Of course, he talked like this. It took a long time. But we didn't even invent knots. We were just tying knots. We were like working out our probably Jewish anxiety. Anyway, my poor talus, I still have it. And my fathers and grandfathers. It's a beautiful tradition. So it's very important, really, to try to find a way to practice approaching or realizing or penetrating, whatever you want to call it, seeing through the illusion of separateness and experiencing some kind of oneness, however briefly. Even if it requires, and I'm going to go out on a limb here, some kind of drug. With my initials, what do you expect? Ram Dass always calls me LSD. He would. Lama Surya Das, right? If you don't remember my name. Thank you. So think about how did Jesus meditate, lost in love, and see if we can imitate that. It's very authentic if we can. It's not fake. And the more we lose ourselves, we can find our true self or the true divine that's beyond ourselves. The more I empty myself, the more room there is for God. This is the path and the fruit sort of in one. Whether you talk about it in a humanistic way, being less selfish and more altruistic and empathically compassionate and empathizing and feeling what others feel. or in a more like exalted and sacred way about the oneness and the non-dual and the inseparability of all interconnected things, or the great emptiness. Buddhism doesn't talk about the one; they always talk about not two. But the oneness in Buddhism, the ultimate truth, is called Mahashunyata, or the vast infinite void. It's not really different than Shankaracharya, the Hindu Advaita Vedanta's supreme self or ultimate truth, I'm sure. So I forgot exactly what time I started, but it's probably time to wrap up. Maybe I'll have a few questions. I have a lot more material here, but I did want to say that being invited to introduce this interfaith symposium and sort of tacitly represent Buddhism and talk about unity and diversity in Buddhism. And I wrote the blurb about it to talk about oneness, and I chose to talk about my guru and my experience. Even, let's not forget, if I'm chanting and singing, he's right there. So it's like beyond oneness. He's always with me. Thank you, Lord. So I'm ending by saying that in Buddhism, we don't use the word oneness. There is no one, because that implies a viewpoint or a separateness. Buddha was a reformer, so he took this opposite tack from Hinduism to the via negativa, as they call it in Christian mysticism. Not this, not that, you might say in the Upanishads, neti, neti. You can't say it's this, you can't say it that. Those are just concepts. And by kind of deconstructing everything, you get to the unconditioned, or the substratum, the oneness, the infinite, luminous, shining void, the effulgent, the overflowing womb of emptiness, of shunyata, not a sterile void, which is like Shankaracharya's, I believe, supreme self or God. It says, if I remember correctly, somewhere in the Upanishads that Brahma, I'm going to use the original words because it's more precise. Brahma, and some of us understand Brahma, Atma, Brahma, Guru, and Atma are one. Now we'll translate. Something is lost in the translation, but it's good enough. Brahma, God, Guru, spiritual master, and Atma, practitioner, or your inner true self or something, maybe your soul, if you like. It's a slippery word. That God, spiritual mentor, master, and our true self are one. That is an awesome statement of a great Trinity that predates Christianity. Of the Holy Trinity, because as soon as there's one, there's two, which means that there's two together is the third. So holy numerology and all that. So in Tibetan Buddhism, we would say that Buddha, Lama, your root Lama, your guru Lama, and the yogi are one in nature. Not that you have to look like them, or your hairdo, or your dress code, or your accent, or language even. Not imitate, but realize authentically your true self with a capital S, not just be an egotist around your small, separate self. So I'd like you to contemplate that as a portal to oneness, and more with the theme of the guru, unity and diversity, see the light, the one, whatever you call it, by any name, it's just even more sweet, and it's so sweet. Higher power. Maybe in Buddhism, people will tell you they don't have a higher power. I say bullshit. The inner power, there is something beyond us, even for Buddhists. We just don't consider it a creator God, but the inner power, or the Buddha nature, it's just like that, same. So, God, Guru, and Yogi, one at heart, very important, always with us, through all the diversity, regardless of gender, color, size, learned or illiterate, I mean, even probably good or bad. I don't know. I mean, the ethical life is important, but beyond, even sinners are God's children, and even amoebas and, mosquitoes, or whatever you're afraid of, sharks and, I don't know, spiders. All God's creatures, great and small. All, we would say in Buddhism, endowed with the luminous Buddha nature. All God's creatures. Any questions? We have time for one or two questions. For you scholars out there in Tibetan Buddhism, we call the oneness Yuganada, inseparability. Zunjuk in Tibetan, inseparability or interpenetrability. Yuganada. Any questions? Okay, I'll say a few more things with pleasure. The guru is like the gate or the doorway to God or to what you're seeking. Don't get stuck in the door. No need to collect door frames or doors. I mean, you can have pictures of gurus. You know, all of these are mirrors to reflect our higher nature. Don't get entrapped by the different forms. As I like to say, to be provocative and kind of keep myself amused, you've seen one true guru, you've seen them all. I mean, how many, you know, like, if you have a mother and a father, how many parents do you need? Of course, it's good to have a village. It takes a village to raise a good child. It takes a village to raise the village idiot, too, so you choose. So some people have one guru, some people have two, maybe none. Just because you have many gurus doesn't mean you're a dilettante, but it can get complicated and confusing. Just like if you have, you know, I don't know, if it's a really good comparison, like too many lovers or boyfriends or girlfriends, you know, it can get confusing. But it's not legislated against. So I recommend, since I don't hear any questions, since everything's very clear to you all, also it's late at night, I know, I'm going to recommend as a way to realize this unity and diversity and really the oneness, to become one. I'm not going to say become one with everything or the guru or anything. I think to realize the oneness or the inseparability or the wholeness, or, you know, to be the totality. As we say in the tantras, the whole universe is my body. And don't emphasize the word my here. This is like the deity Vajrayogini speaking. The whole universe, my body, all beings, my heart, mind. To realize that kind of unity and diversity or oneness or totality, and to be that, not just my little self, pathetic cog in a wheel, nobody cares if I live or die, neurotic mentality, but the whole universe, my body, all beings, my heart, mind, soul. Wow. That's something to contemplate. And you see, that's a little more interesting and challenging than just saying it's all one or having a vague notion of oneness, like a big blob of oneness, like a jellyfish. Oh, it's all the same. You're fooling yourself if you just say that all the time, like a rationalization. It's not the same to you if you are in pain or pleasure, or if your child runs out in the street, you leap up, scream, and jump after them. It's not all the same whether they live or die, I don't think. Although if you look at it in the cosmic perspective, from chilocosms and yugas and, you know, whatever it is, 200,000 years of Homo sapiens or so. It doesn't matter that much if your child lives or dies, but from your point of view, from my point of view, it's the whole world would be like dying. That's why it says in the Jewish wisdom scripture, the Talmud, if I can remember, to save one life or save one soul is to save the whole world. I don't understand that rationally, but it resonates as true. Because all are in one. And that's the oneness, beyond big and small. So I recommend having a daily practice, or daily-ish practice. Let's not get too perfectionistic. Notice I'm not saying to meditate or to do yoga or pray or what. A daily-ish explicit spiritual practice. Ish, very important. And second, some form of spiritual study. Theory and practice support each other like the wings of a bird, very important. Doesn't mean you have to be a bookworm. Not everybody's a studious or philosopher, but study and think about things, or open the book of nature and study nature or relationships. So practice, daily practice, study. And third, some kind of inner growth work, self-inquiry, introspection, learning from your experiences, not just going from one experience to rushing to the next. Journaling, therapy, support groups, 12-step if you need that. It's a great thing for people that have substance problems. So those three are kind of inner, solid, alone-ish practices. And the other triad, this is the 6 building blocks of a spiritual life, I believe. The other triad is group practice like satsang, sangha, community. Teacher practice, that doesn't mean teaching, it means working with elders and mentors, gurus, if you like. And the third one that's together is seva, or service, volunteering, giving back, giving yourself. Giving materially, but also giving of yourself, your time, your energy. Non-attachment is the ultimate form of generosity. So the three alone-ish are daily practice, study, and inner growth work, not just sitting in the pew dreaming about winning the lottery or comparing your furs to the other people's, but like really, being in the practice of that house of worship that you chose to spend your time in. And then the group practices of community with teacher, teachings, and service, seva, very important. And then 6 more personal tips that I found are important, as I guess I'm becoming older, if not an elder, for the practitioner. These are like very important virtues. Otherwise, we just end up sort of like dying with our head encrusted with salt. This is a Tibetan saying, forgive me. It's kind of like an old salty dog or something, not very clear or fresh or alive. I know you don't put dying together with alive, but you could have a good death. You could go consciously into sleep and in awareness. You could go consciously into death and awareness, they say, and into the bardo and beyond. You could. So inquiry first, seeking, questioning, having that kind of really intention or motivation to understand is very important. Not just parroting, memorizing, joining the club, being a real practitioner, a sadhak, doing sadhana, practice, including questioning and inquiry. And I'm not going to know about faith and all now. That's another subject. But questioning and investigation is an important part of Buddha's recipe for enlightenment. The 7 factors of enlightenment, he calls them. And second, surrender, acceptance. Acceptance has its own transformative magic. It doesn't mean just giving up or indifference and complacence. Think about it. If you accept your mate a little, wouldn't that help transform your relationship? Rather than always trying to change them, a hopeless task anyway. Also self-acceptance and self-love. So surrender and acceptance, tolerance, very important. Third, awareness cultivation, whatever you call it, mindfulness, meditation, concentration, paying attention, working on oneself. Gurdjieff called it the work. Fourth, love in action, really cultivate, practicing warm, empathic compassion, not just mouthing the words or believing in it, doing it. Love comes through loving, not from outside. So these are more like virtues of the practitioner, as you can see. Questioning, seeking, inquiring. Second, surrender. Third, cultivating awareness. Fourth, love in action. Fifth, attitude transformation. Actually working to recondition and decondition your selfish, egocentric, narcissistic habits. Not just to wear the right color clothes or be in the right club. Even if it's called an ashram, a religion, or whatever the current fad or movement is. So attitude transformation, working on that. And of course there are practices for that. Loving kindness, cultivation, forgiveness, praying, humbling yourself, asking for help. There's a lot of ways to work attitude transformation in dyads, feeling what others feel and being moved to help. Empathy is the root of compassion. And last but not least, really patience and diligence, having a long-term view. This is an infinite journey, and the inner journey, the spiritual journey, which is beyond outer and inner, is so infinite. It's so vast. It's so broad. We're bandying about, we're talking about easily very big concepts like oneness, like God, like enlightenment, like realization, even samadhi, and even yoga. These are huge. They're not that simple. It takes time. It takes time for a cucumber to get pickled. Not just 1 week or 1 weekend or 1 month even. I know it's a little sour or kosher image, but you got to put the cucumber in the vinegar for several months till it gets pickled, but then it never goes back. And in spiritual life, I'd say at least several years or decades or lifetimes. It depends on you and your karma and also your aspirations. Intention and attention. Motivation, intention, and attention. Awareness practice, so important. And pursuing the wisdom and love that brings us to this oneness, this harmony and this peace which surpasses understanding, this great shining pearl beyond price. The nirvana within samsara, the light within the shadows, or as the Bible even says, heaven on earth. The kingdom of heaven is here. That's an awesome statement of unity, of seeing the oneness within everything, even with all the shit that's going down in our crazed world. So I can see it's getting late. I've been talking a lot. I think now it's time to tell the all-important closing line about oneness. So if you've heard this before, like many of you, don't shout out the answer. You're not going to get any good karma points. What did the Dalai Lama say to the pizza guy in Brooklyn? What's the title of my new book? You all haven't read it? Make Me One with Everything. Okay. Good night. Thank you. I laid a bomb. Thank you. Love to one and all. Beautiful. Thank you. And thank you to Shivananda Ashram, Swami Shivananda, Vishnu Devananda, and all of you. I've actually been at that Mother Ashram in Rishikesh when I was young. It was wonderful. Thank you all. It's beautiful to be here.